Hello and welcome to Exceptional TV. My name is Karen Judd Smith, creator of the Ultimate Difference Formula and a social change leader's mentor, and I am your host. Now, for years, my focus has been on the people who lead, who make good trouble, as John Lewis did throughout his life. And these people are not always those with great titles or formal positions. Very often, they're powerfully driven by a sense of social justice and a profound belief in the value of each person. Now, so what we do here each week is to take time to look a little bit beneath the surface, to dig into the deeper currents that drive people, and importantly, to highlight the clues their successes have left behind. After all, what better way can we honor others' lives and to add value to our own than by learning from one another's strengths and successes as we do our part to help make our world a better place. So with each week, we explore the lives, the lessons learned, and the insights of remarkable individuals who make a difference. Now, today I'm here with Rika Santhanam, and we're going to take the time to look at the lives of a group of people that may well be in your very midst, but you might not even know that they're there. Welcome, Rika.
Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You know, before we dive into the topic of highly sensitive people, please, I'd like to just hear a little bit about how you got to be here. As I understand, you started off as a concert pianist, and now you're working with highly sensitive people. How did this all come about?
Well, it's been a road with quite a few twists and turns to get here. I guess, I guess one of the reasons I wanted to work with highly sensitive people is because I'm highly sensitive myself. And so I feel I know where they're coming from. I mean, it's true that each person is an individual, each person is unique. But still, I think there are enough commonalities that I feel I know where they're coming from because in our North American culture, I think highly sensitive people are not valued as much as they should be. And I think,
Rika, highly sensitive people, until I met you, I had not heard that term.
well, actually,
My
for a long time.
ignorance, my ignorance. So can you give us even a little bit of how did you discover even the word or the term and that you knew that applied to you? I mean, what was your experience that brought you to the recognition that you were one of these and then you took on that name? Or how did that work? Because, I've been around for 5 years in my life, and it's a term that I just hadn't come across, and especially not in the workplace. Yeah.
Well, early on in my life, I noticed that I had, very intense emotions at times, uh, and and fears, and I felt different from other people. But it took a long time before I became acquainted with the term highly sensitive. And that was through a process of inner work that I did on myself. And I discovered the book by Dr. Elaine Aron, The Highly Sensitive Person. And she's done a lot of really substantial, important work and research on the topic of high sensitivity.
So
And
even in your own life, then, what from being a child who you recognized there were some things there, to when you came across the term highly sensitive. I mean, lifespan were you 10? Were you 20?
well, when I came across the book, I was around 30 years old.
So you lived most of your life then, not having even a sense that this was a thing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it was really a revelation to me when I read the book that actually 20% of the population is highly sensitive, and this trait it's an innate trait. It's not a disorder. It's not a problem. It's
Right.
perfectly normal, healthy. innate trait. And in fact, biologists have found that even among like over 100 species, that trait exists, because there is actually a survival advantage for that trait, because you can imagine, our ancestors or even animals, they're in the forest, and because one of the things about highly sensitive beings is that they have a finely attuned nervous system. And in fact,
Ah,
research has shown that their brains and their nervous systems actually work a bit differently from other people's. And so, you can imagine when they're in a forest and they're attuned to these fine sounds, these
right.
subtle sounds and smells. So, if there's a predator
Yeah,
close by,
yeah.
they'll be able to detect that predator before that predator can detect them. So there's definitely there has been like a survival advantage to having this trait, and I guess that's why we find it in so many species.
And so it would be good for me to have you on my team. Out of Thank you.
Well,
But
yeah, well,
anyway, anyway, back to your story. But I'm sorry, I had to stop you because you leapt right into speaking about highly sensitives, and I'm going, but I don't even really know what a highly sensitive person is, or the background for that. And so thank you for, and so I would imagine then in today's environment, it's a little bit different. We're not exactly in a jungle.
mhm.
But those sensitivities have got to apply in many, many, many different areas. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. In fact, just allow me to just describe some
Please.
characteristics of highly sensitive people. One thing, like I mentioned, they have highly attuned nervous systems, and so they can notice they're open to subtlety and subtle sounds, smells. And the thing is that you can imagine that when you are open to the subtlety, when you are in an environment that's really loud or really stimulating or
Right.
hectic, highly sensitive people can really become overstimulated
Right.
and just overwhelmed.
Right.
So it's like there is that aspect to this trait, which is something that highly sensitive people, or HSPs, because HSP is the acronym. So yeah, overwhelm is really something that that they struggle with at times. But it's interesting that when they are in a relatively more quiet and calm environment, they can concentrate really well, because another one of their characteristics is this capacity for deep thinking. You know, they will, when they're faced with a new situation, they will want to observe things and think about them. That's why oftentimes they need moments to withdraw and to be quiet and to just recharge their batteries. And yeah, it's so that's an overview of you know
Right.
high sensitivity.
So then you had lived a good part of your life until you were 30, and then you discovered this book, and this description of yourself in many ways. Then how did that help you better understand yourself? How did that help you better understand where you wanted to go in your
Well,
life?
Well, it helped me in the sense that I could put a finger on, identify certain things that I had experienced ever since I was very young. Like, for instance, the intense emotions and, sometimes being overwhelmed and feeling anxiety. And just the fact that to realize that there are 20% of the population that are highly sensitive, that was really empowering, because ever since I was young, at times I felt different, and I know that a lot of highly sensitive people have that feeling, and that feeling can start even in the family. And I wanted to point out that in North American culture, high sensitivity is not valued as much as it should be. And so quite a few highly sensitive people have been criticized for their sensitivity, even shamed.
Right, right,
And that can lead to low self-esteem because
right.
it's seen as a weakness.
Not as a strength and as something that is sought after. Question: in terms of the kinds of I would imagine that there is not just one kind of highly sensitive person. That the sensitivities would cover quite a range of capacities. Capacity for sensitivity, I guess. Could you explain a little bit more about that? I'm just assuming that. I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
yeah, it's true that there is a spectrum of sensitivity. Of course, the term highly sensitive is more specific, and it really describes a certain type of individual. But there are people who, without being highly sensitive, are more moderately sensitive. And then, of course, there are people who are really not that sensitive.
Right.
Um, but like I say, the term highly sensitive does describe a particular type of individual, and like because there has been so much research on that topic of high sensitivity by people like Elaine Aron, there are really certain common characteristics to people who are highly sensitive.
So, what are some of those common characteristics? I mean, the sensitivity, is it auditory? Is it, sensory sensitive? This because the senses sensitivity. Is it which of the senses does it pertain to, or all of them, or is it just an attunement?
Well, high sensitivity really it covers everything. It really highly sensitive people take in more from their environment because, for instance, they're more attuned to details. They're more, like I said, they're more attuned to subtle sounds, smells, sights, and it really is an all-encompassing quality. And that's the reason why at times they're taking in so much from their environment that they have to take time sometimes to just withdraw and to be
Right.
quiet and rest and recharge their batteries.
So the highly sensitive then would tend to be highly auditorily
Oh,
sensitive, smell, aware of temperature differentials and light differences, and pretty much all of the highly sensitive are those that cover all of those
oh,
sensory sensory inputs. Not just, I mean, like you wouldn't have somebody who is highly sensitive auditorily and somebody else who would be highly sensitive smell wise.
no, it really encompasses all the
Got it.
senses.
Got it.
And also, for instance, in social situations, when a highly sensitive person enters a room, um, they will right away they'll be aware of the vibes in that room. Are the people in that room, are they hostile, or
Right.
is it a more harmonious situation? And so they will be aware of these things. And also in social situations, they tend to have empathy and be aware what other people are feeling.
Right.
So yeah, so it plays out in social relationships
Right.
as well.
So how do when you come across or when you recognize or when you discover another highly sensitive person, how do they deal with these overstimulating situations? You've mentioned that people withdraw. That's that would be a very natural response in many cases. They'd probably go to a quieter part of the room, or even say time for me to go. Bye. But but what are some ways that some of there are other ways that they deal with these intense situations? For example, I think you deal with, or you've worked with people in workplaces. That's got to be problematic because you can't exactly just say, okay, I need to get out of here. What do they do in the workplace situation if they are highly sensitive?
Well, actually, some people do that. They will. I was speaking once to a woman who was in a new job, a new situation, and after the first week, she went with a notepad. She visited all the floors in her building, looking for places, quiet places where she could withdraw, and she regularly does that at work. She just finds,
Yeah,
places,
quiet spot. Yep.
yeah, quiet
Yep.
spots, and regularly she does that. So it is possible. I think it is possible to find ways of adapting to the situation. And I think that employers can also help in doing that, if they can see, for instance, instead of being critical and saying, hey, telling a highly sensitive employee, where are you rushing off to all the time?
Right.
They can understand that it's something that HSPs really need, and that when they do have it can be just like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, that
Right.
just to calm down a bit, and really after that it enables them to focus better and to work better.
So how I would imagine that there are a lot of bosses, whether they, and probably not just in the HR office, because they often, even if they're aware there, managers, people in various roles, if they don't know about HSPs, is there a way for like those who are highly sensitive to better inform them? I mean, how do you deal with that in a an environment where people don't understand that this is a thing?
Well, for sure. I think that for an employer to ask directly to an employee, are you highly sensitive? Because like I said before, quite a few highly sensitive people have been criticized by people in their environment,
Right.
for their sensitivity. So they might not want to be too open about that. They might not want to mention it because they're afraid that it'll be like a strike against them. It'll be considered like a liability. I think that maybe a more subtle approach would be like just noticing certain things. Like for instance, a lot of highly sensitive people are very sensitive to caffeine, so they might not drink coffee as much as other employees. Or but I think maybe sometimes just if being perhaps maybe being more sympathetic, like saying, well, I just, I'd like to help you if in case that this is something that you are highly sensitive. And so I'm just interested. I notice
Yeah.
certain things that, that, you don't drink much coffee or, so I'm
Right.
just curious. And, it has to be, I think, maybe a more subtle approach. And if you find the HSP is willing to talk about it, you can maybe
Right.
even send them a survey or something, just asking them how they find the work environment. I know, for instance, some employers, they will give a choice to their employees whether they want to be like in an open office where the desks are all next to each other
Right.
and it's more stimulating for all the extroverted people out there.
Right.
Or if they prefer a more separate, a more quiet space to be able to work and focus better.
Do you
And
do you find that employers are aware of this group of people and the
um,
value of having them in addition to the challenges that they face, or is this something that is just a growing awareness, or?
I think it's a gradual growing awareness, but I still think a lot of employers are not aware of the issue of high sensitivity.
And the value of having highly sensitive, I mean, because from what I understand, their capacity to focus and to produce is, again, high. So, there would be great value to having them on your team.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely, because highly sensitive employees, generally, they're conscientious. They have really an eye for detail. And because of their empathy, they are aware of the needs of clients and customers. And they usually contribute in a positive way to the social atmosphere, the social
right.
context. So yeah, for sure, they can be very valuable employees, and they don't usually aggressively promote themselves. In fact,
Right.
some of them actually they dislike doing it. So sometimes it could be maybe easy for an employer to overlook a valuable employee. But for sure, they can contribute a lot to the workplace.
Right. I mean, that's very clear just from the definition of what an HSP is. So, are there any other specific ways that you would see that employers could really help? I mean, even I guess it would make sense to me. I guess I would. My natural thought is I would want HSPs in my on my team.
Absolutely.
And so even there, informing their HR department or those who are hiring and onboarding, that would be an important area to focus on, just even building the awareness in the organization, and then making sure that these kinds of people are definitely encouraged and not given a hard time. So, any other recommendations for employers, for HR, for onboarding those kinds of things, that because it just seems like it's a almost a no-brainer to really want to have HSPs on your team.
Yes, it is. And I think it is a good idea. It would be, I think, for an organization or company to really communicate to their HR department to say, look, we would like to have, uh, not necessarily have a quota system, but
Right, right, but not to ignore them and not to
yeah,
devalue. Yeah, yeah, to be aware and to yeah.
yes, exactly. And just, getting the information out there that, these are the characteristics of highly sensitive people, and we would like to have these people in our organization, in our company. And I think just the fact that a company, an employer can have like a positive, can see high sensitivity as an asset and not
Right,
a liability. Already, that I think that goes a long way in helping highly sensitive
right,
employees,
right.
because sometimes in some situations, um, HSPs can be seen as trouble because if there's something unhealthy going on in the work environment, they will be the first ones to feel that and to notice that, and so that could be an employer could see that as a source of trouble from the HSP. They say, "Oh my goodness, why is this person complaining, and why is this person?"
Right, right. Squeaky wheel or canary in the. I don't want to reduce people to squeaky wheels or canaries, but they're the terms that are often out there. So then, because of that sensitivity, they're seeing things that others do not yet see.
Exactly. And I think it's true. They can be the canary in the coal mine in that they will be aware of a certain unhealthy situation before
Right,
others. And I think that instead of seeing them as a source of trouble, if an employer can see them as a signal
right,
that something is not right, because eventually that unhealthy situation is going
right,
to affect the other employees.
right, right.
So sometimes using like I know, for instance, HSPs can be great as managers precisely because they notice the subtle shifts, the subtle
Mm-hmm.
changes before other people do. And so they can notify bosses that, hey, something is not right here and we
Right.
better fix it before it affects everybody and before it becomes a real problem.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, many reasons why it would be good to have HSPs. I mean, because one of the things that are sorely needed, even just in general, when you look across the corporate world at this time, I know a lot of the big issues, especially in the bigger companies, are all of these the challenges that organizations face to be able to adapt quickly in this day and age as everything is changing and the larger organizations, many times very, very hierarchically structured and everything in place, but not quick to adapt. But one of the as you said, in the kind of the North American culture, and definitely in the corporate culture as well, there's this strong, outgoing, the leader type, the ones who are out there and getting things done, tend to be valued rather than those who are aware and sensitive and almost like the mortar between the bricks and holding everything together in actual fact. Increasingly, there's the recognition that and it is easily labeled these days as EQ or the emotional quotient. But there's the recognition that resilience and those other softer oriented leadership type capacities, and even here the sensitivity, the awareness, the empathy, is actually gradually becoming more intellectually acceptable in the corporate world, but practically speaking, it's also really, really needed, in management. So, so it seems like this is another resource because I'm sure that these HSPs are by and large, very aware, very intelligent, very smart. I mean, talk about great people to be in your organization. I can't help but think I'd almost go out there looking for them if I was a big corporation.
Yeah, for sure, because they can be quite creative and even visionaries,
Right.
um, because they think about things deeply, and especially they look at the long-term consequences of certain situations and certain changes in a corporation, and so certainly they have a lot to offer, but a lot of them actually become they decide to be self-employed precisely because they may not find the working environments that are really helping them bring out the best in them. um, so there's that aspect as well.
So then that can be a challenge for retention of those kinds of people because that environment is, yeah, that's a sad loss in the bigger picture. Understanding it, it's a sad loss. Yeah. So now that's the workplace. Now in our lives, there's the social lives of HSP. There's all of the areas of the reality of our in this time of COVID, health systems and everything else. I know that part of when you describe yourself in the beginning as saying I felt different, many times that can sometimes people then can start and think, well, is there something wrong with somebody? So then how do you tease out this piece, that no, this is not a problem, this is as you said, this is a trait, it's not a problem, it's not an illness, it's not so how do people deal with this, even in the like mental health arenas and things like that? Is there challenges there for HSPs?
Um, well, certainly when seeking mental health services, among some professionals, there can be a tendency to see high sensitivity in and of itself as a disorder. Of course, highly sensitive people who have had troubled childhoods or abusive childhoods
Right.
and who have experienced trauma,
Yeah.
they are more likely to develop problems with anxiety, with depression. So they may seek mental health services for that reason. And of course, when a mental health professional wants to treat that anxiety or depression, that's okay. But it's just that when they see the high sensitivity as in and of itself as a problem, I think that it doesn't help a highly sensitive
Right.
patient. And I think that especially when it comes to also prescription medication, like I was lucky the first time I took medication for depression, because at one point I suffered from severe depression. I had read Elaine Aron's book on high sensitivity, so I was aware that the dosage, I may not need a
Right.
regular
Right.
dosage. So I told my psychiatrist, I said, look, maybe we should start with a lower dosage. So, and luckily she was open to that. And so, and
Right.
that's what we did. She started with half the dosage that she normally, starts a patient on. And it worked well. I mean, she told me, this is going to start to work in about 2, 3, 4 weeks, and I felt the effects right away on the first day I took the
Yeah.
medication.
Wow.
And so afterwards, after a while we tried to increase it, but no, it just didn't work for me, the higher dosage, or rather what is considered the regular dosage, because
Right.
finally I took that medication for about 1 year, and the whole time I was really at half the dose. That it's not really even considered, by medical literature, it's not even considered a therapeutic dose, but it was fine for me.
Right. Right.
So I think
So,
that, yes, I think that highly sensitive people have to, I think at times, they have to be their best advocate and mention this to any sort of health professionals, because it's not just mental health. It can be even, you know,
sure.
any sort of medication, and any issue.
Even from, a headache, a Tylenol to an anything. Now, my son who wouldn't eat peas when he was a kid because he couldn't tolerate them. Would that make him? It might. That might not make him highly sensitive, huh? Um, but he can't. He cannot handle He will not touch alcohol because he just can't handle it. Maybe he is. I don't know.
Well, maybe because there are a lot of HSPs who don't drink much alcohol for that reason either.
Yeah,
So,
can't handle the taste of it and won't. He
oh, so it's the taste. Well, for
Well,
it,
I
you
think
can't.
I don't know whether it's the taste or he just won't. He had some on his 21st birthday because everybody wanted him to, but other than that, he's always the designated driver. Just has no. I don't know whether it's the taste or the impact. I have to ask him.
Yeah, because like I said, HSPs are very sensitive to alcohol, to caffeine.
Right.
So they usually won't want to have much of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. He'll make himself drink caffeine because he knows he's got to get work done if he's got a long day or something like that. But other than that, doesn't like it either. Just yeah. Who knows? Anyway, I guess you've raised a question now. Now I'm going to be saying, oh, is this person highly sensitive? This person. So would somebody who's wondering if they're highly sensitive, or even if they're moderately sensitive, what you've mentioned one book. Is there who again? Maybe we can put the name of the book, or you can mention the author and the name of the book again, or if you've got
Yeah.
other recommended resources for people. Other than self. I would imagine. I know one thing that later on you've got something for people, something that they can take away. But even there, just to contact you to ask you questions, because that would be good. I've got your email.
Sure, I'd be really happy to answer any questions that people have. I know that in Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person, she does have a questionnaire to help people determine whether
Okay.
they are highly sensitive or maybe moderately sensitive, and on her website as well. So I think there's also the website Highly Sensitive Refuge. So I mean, I think that if you just Google, highly sensitive
Right. Right.
person, you'll
You'll
find
start
plenty
and
of
get
resources.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But to have a real live person to speak to, I mean, I know that that's always.
Yeah.
I like to speak to real life people personally, but still, not about
Sure.
everything. If they're a telephone number that's calling me on my cell phone and I don't know them, I don't want to talk to them. Um, but yeah, when I've got a question, I definitely want to speak to somebody. And then there's, I know there's another sector of our lives that I would imagine would would be an aspect of HSPs. What about spirituality in HSPs, or religion in HSPs? Or, I suspect there's a whole books that could be written about it that still haven't yet been written about it. But anyway, a little bit more information about that area of our lives and highly sensitive persons.
Well, HSPs are really very well suited for spiritual work precisely because they like to withdraw, and they like to be quiet, and they like to think over things deeply. And so most HSPs, when they pursue some sort of spiritual practice, or when they become interested in spirituality, they do it through other ways other than organized religion. But some HSPs like organized religion. They like meeting with other people,
Right, right.
going to church and stuff like that. But I think that meditation is something. Of course, it's now meditation has become so popular generally,
Right, right,
but I think that's a perfect example of how HSPs can really be can really notice and value certain things ahead of other people, because HSPs have always um, been interested in spirituality and in pursuing spiritual pursuits. And so the fact that now, sort of, so to speak, society's catching up with that, and is interested in meditation and things like that. I think that's a great indication of how HSPs can be pioneers in a way in certain things, and spirituality is one of those things. And I think another reason why HSPs are interested in spirituality is that spiritual practices can also help them deal with these moments of
right.
overwhelm and overstimulation. Meditation it can be so useful.
It's a calming thing. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and also the fact that I think that highly sensitive people can feel intense emotions, can feel deep emotions, and so just the fact that they are open to, they can be really moved by beauty, by a beautiful sunset,
Right.
by a walk in nature, in the woods, in a forest, and that lends itself to a certain spiritual outlook.
Right.
I'm sure, I have a very good friend who's a Benedictine monk. And so once I asked him, I said, "Do you think that a lot of the monks in your community are highly sensitive?" And he said, "Yeah, I think so." So yeah, I think they're really well suited for
Right.
any sort of spiritual pursuit.
So yeah, so that means perhaps even that's been a long time calling for HSPs in some ways. It would be because I guess there's a natural draw to certain things for each kind of character type or personality type or capacity for certain things in our lives.
Yeah, because historically, um, HSPs have been, if you look at in certain Indo-European cultures, more long-lasting and happy Indo-European cultures,
Right,
HSPs have played the role of advisors to the ruling class, and also spiritual healers. And you can imagine that they're really well suited to be advisors because, you know, take for instance an impulsive king who wants to declare war on a neighbor. The HSP advisor will be able to step back and think about things, look at the long-term consequences, and
right.
be able to moderate that king who really wants to declare war. The advisor will say, well, look, it's easy for you to start a war, but how are you going to end it? So I think that I think that even now, even if it's, you know, I think a lot of HSPs play the role of advisors in their social circles or in their families or, you know, situations like that. So it's interesting to see that there's also a historical connection.
Right, right. So, are there kinds of, in that sense, other than a spiritual calling, because many will go that way, but not everybody would. Are there other kinds of I'm just curious, jobs that that HSPs would tend to be interested in? Are they artistic? Are they,
Oh yeah.
I guess probably musicians? I mean, case in point. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, like I mean, it took me a long time to really understand my own high sensitivity, but I realized that it was the common thread that was really responsible for really all the meaningful events in my life, like starting my career as a concert pianist. And yes, it's true, there are a lot of highly sensitive people who are artists, and it allows them to have that freedom and to
right.
to um, to to express that depth also in their work and that sense of meaning in their work. But also, I think in the helping professions, um, like mental health workers, social workers, teachers. But of course, when like now the teacher's role, like, because I know my mother was a teacher for over 30 years, and in her time it wasn't so stressful to be a teacher because
Right, right.
there was more discipline in the classroom. So of course, nowadays it can be really stressful to be a teacher, and so some highly sensitive people can be sort of turned off, or even if they have been teaching for a while, they'll say, I can't take it anymore. I'm
Right.
just burnt out. And but of course, that can apply even to teachers who are not so highly sensitive.
Right, especially
So
at this time. Yeah.
yes, especially at this time. But it's interesting. Speaking of this time, this pandemic, I think actually, from what I see, a lot of there are a lot of highly sensitive people out there who are actually perhaps better prepared for these times because, take for instance, the social distancing, the more social isolating that
Yeah,
we've been
that's not a
doing.
problem for
Yeah,
them so much. Yeah.
yeah, because even before the pandemic, many of them, at times they didn't want to go out because they want to stay home and just
Right.
be quiet and reflect and recharge their batteries. So I think maybe in that sense they're better prepared for the pandemic, and also just being prepared for anxiety provoking situations and overwhelming situations. They've been dealing with overwhelm and overstimulation even before this pandemic. So they can deal with that now. And I know some people, they actually feel actually less socially isolated, because now that a lot of people are feeling anxious, it's like, well, I'm not
Right.
alone. I'm
Right.
not alone feeling, feeling really anxious or feeling at times overwhelmed. So there's that aspect as well. And I think that's a reason why I think at this time, that's why I'm interested in creating this course, this online course for highly sensitive people. I think that at this time, they can really help others in navigating these difficult times because they've been there.
Right.
And yeah.
So let me phrase this question this way, and you kind of what the way you came to this point. I was wondering if you might, like in one sentence, what would you say to other HSPs at this time in terms of how they might help the average person? If there's an average person on the face of the earth, but the other average person, and then and what would you say to the non-HSP, at this time of COVID and uncertainty, to the non-HSP person as they think about or even wonder about HSPs or what they could learn or gain from or whatever. What would you say to both those two different, from your experience and from the insights that you've gained, what would be just one thing that you would like to say to each of those groups in relationship to HSPs and non?
Well, I think that what I would say to HSPs is to gain the confidence to realize not to take what they have learned through their high sensitivity, not to take it for granted, and realize that it can be useful. It can be useful to other people to learn how do they manage overwhelm? How do they manage, highly
Right.
stimulating environments?
They have
And
something to teach. Yes.
yes, exactly, exactly. And to really speak up and sometimes it can be just in situations like because a lot of times when they feel overwhelmed, they tend to close down.
Right, right.
They don't want to, they don't feel comfortable, they don't want to say anything. But sometimes just telling someone, oh, I feel I feel really, I don't feel too good with, it's loud. I'm not used to these loud sounds or whatever. Just telling people, and like I say, just realizing what their value is, that what they have to contribute is valuable. And for non-HSPs, I think I would call on them you know, to try to keep an open mind and to realize um, that HSPs don't have only they're not only in overwhelm in an overwhelmed state, that they can think deeply about things. And sometimes it's just having a conversation like, what do you feel about this? Or,
Right.
what are you thinking? And, just getting a conversation going, I think can be really helpful. And it comes to mind this quote by Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "In a gentle way, you can shake the world."
Right.
And I think that highly sensitive people are really well placed to do that because of their empathy, because of their compassion, and because of their capacity to think deeply about things and to look at long-term consequences of certain trends or certain actions. I think that they can do that. They can, in a gentle way, shake the world. And I would call on HSPs to realize that.
And one of the interesting things, or interesting to me because I just thought it, you know, is that that just even talking about HSPs and therefore talking about the characteristics of highly sensitive persons, it gives us a chance in our very shiny object, fast-paced, Twitter, glitzy world, in a way, where everything is short, sharp, and then, magnificent, beautiful. This, in the way we are on Facebook and Twitter and presenting our world, where there's not always the depth. There's not always the digging down into and taking the time to sit with and to ponder and to even go to the edges of boredom and therefore stretch our minds and our imaginations and our thinking. Just even to value, by learning to value these individuals, we can learn to value these aspects of our lives in a time when everything is so fast-paced and we're concerned about things changing overnight and can we keep up? FOMO rules the world. The fear of missing out just makes everything happen so quickly, when in fact we need to take the time to take that deep breath. So thank you for, even just here, even having the opportunity to speak about highly sensitive people, I think gives us that time to recognize the value of those quieter, gentler ways of shaking the world and even our own lives. So thank you very much, Rika, for giving us this time to do that. Now, as I mentioned before, I had asked you, because I always like those that I invite on to leave something for the interviewer, and whether it be for those listening, for the audience, whether they be watching live or the replay later on or even years to come. So I know that you have prepared something for us. So could you tell us a little bit about what you did pull together for people?
Actually, it's a PDF document, and I indicated that it's for HSPs, but I think that anybody could really benefit. It's really some practices and some a breathing exercise to help people in these times that are so stressful and that are so demanding.
Right.
I just I hope if people want to check that out, and I'd be really happy to have feedback and to know what people think, and if people have additional questions about maybe questions about whether if in fact if they are highly sensitive. I know
Right.
usually when I mention the characteristics, it's like right away they say, oh yeah, that's me.
Right,
So,
right, which may or may not be the case, but I guess we can identify with many aspects of it. But yeah, whether we're they have that high degree of sensitivity, that's a slightly different question. But at least right there, you've helped me feel good about some parts of my character today.
good.
So I didn't say all, I just said some parts.
Well,
So,
nobody's perfect.
oh, oh, darn. Okay, so anyway, well, right below, on the Exceptional TV and on the page, and I think most people probably, if you're watching this now, definitely, or if you're watching it later on, just have to look for, do a search on our exceptional.tv page for Rika. And right on that page, there's a place to download the PDF and or to communicate with you. So if you've got questions for Rika, shoot her off an email. You want
Sure.
to download the PDF, just check that box and we'll get you the PDF immediately. So that's about it for, we've just about wrapped up, taken all of our time already. If there's anything else you'd like to close out with, some closing remarks, or anything else that you'd like to end up with, Rika, before we close out?
Well, one thing I have to mention is that highly sensitive people are great listeners.
Ah,
And they like to listen to people, and you know I think that even non-HSPs can learn to value that, because in fact, maybe that's one of the ways that they could identify people who are HSP in their environment, is if there's somebody who's a really good listener and who has a tendency to be a bit more quiet, then might be an HSP.
yeah, and it's one of those funny things when you have a conversation with somebody who really listens to you. Um,
Yeah.
we always love those conversations. So, anyway, so thank you so much, Rika, for taking the time to be with us here today. It's been a delight to have you with us, and I'm so glad that you gave us your time. I would encourage any of our listeners to, shoot off that email to Rika if you've got
Sure.
questions, to download her PDF. And other than that, I look forward to meeting you all again, same time and same place for our next episode of Exceptional TV next week. And I believe that we have another young lady from the Bay Area who herself was a dancer and a teacher, and worked in the tech world. But then, as she discovered one of her dance students disappeared, she came to realize that they had actually been trafficked. And so she started up a whole NGO, non-governmental organization, nonprofit, for dealing with human trafficking. And so that will be the topic for next week. As you can see, we love to focus here on the unusual and to dig a little deeper. So come back and join us for Exceptional TV again next week. And again, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rika, for taking the time to be here with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy.
Thank you. See you all next week.
Thank you.